Hello, everybody. A very good, evening, afternoon, wherever you are in the world. And there are some people, I'm so excited. Thank you for joining. Thank you for watching. Let's give it a few more moments for some more people to tune in. I just heard that a friend of mine tried to tune into the short live videos or events, Reiki Daily, that I tried to do on YouTube and on Instagram. He tried to tune in, and every time when he got a message, it was live, and he clicked on going live, then it was gone already, and somehow it wasn't saved. So this is saved, and a lot of people are watching the YouTube show at a later stage. And this is brilliant. I'm just so excited to be able to connect and to have this opportunity. Isn't that funny? I was about to say pressure every week. But of course, it is an opportunity. So to have this opportunity every week to reach out, to connect, to dive deep into topics, to learn more about Reiki and to experience things collectively. The topic today really came already last week at the YouTube show, and it was channeled. So there was no escape. And I did try to escape because I wasn't quite sure if that was a little bit too deep. But it is about history, and about history shapes us. And one could argue how history holds us back. And the question is, how is that possible? And why is this the case? And we are going to explore this together. And when I prepared for the show tonight, I realized this is such a deep topic. I thought, well, really, one could write a book about it. And then I thought, well, I am. So I am working on a book at present, and I mentioned that before, about karma. And history and karma are obviously very connected. I would like to start with a few, just some reflections about history and what history does to us. And well, one could go into all sorts of history, into our family history, into the world history, into studying history. What I want to do is I want to go into the history of either the country or the ethnic group we are part of. And of course, what first comes to mind is I am German, and I have tried so hard. The accent is still there, and I have just given up. I don't think I'll ever be able to get rid of it. But so it's very obvious. I am German, and at present I am in Germany. I'm in Potsdam, which is a beautiful historic town. Primarily dating back from the 18th century, late 17th, mid 18th century. A lot of the buildings are listed palaces. The German, first the Prussian kings, and then the German emperors had a palace here. So it's a beautiful place with lots of history here. And of course, that's the topic, history. And even when you walk through the parks and you see these signs of history, well, very obvious, there are palaces, and just like 10 minutes walk is a beautiful little park with a lake, and there's a small palace, I think it was the summer palace of a king, called the Marble Palace, and it's obviously all built in marble and gilt, and it's very, very beautiful. But at the time, it was not public, and the public was not allowed to enter the park. So history was very much divided in recent centuries and millennia, I suppose, into those who had something and those who were just peasants, farmers, land workers, and really struggled. So some people had an awful lot of money, and so those were normally those who were ruling the countries as well. And some people have very little money. And I'm absolutely in no way making any reference or even thinking of any similarities in our day and age. I leave that to everybody as a point for reflection. But this is not really the kind of history I wanted to tune into. I wanted to tune into the more recent history. And it's interesting. I always had a fascination with England, with the UK. And I went there, I think, the first time when I was in my teens, and very, very regularly. And I loved it. And I still remember when I was probably 17 or 18, I went to one of my favorite seaside places, Brighton. I stayed in a little bed and breakfast, and I went to the beach, and I started talking to some people there. And there was an older gentleman, and we started chatting. And once he heard that I was from Germany, he was, I wouldn't say apprehensive, but he was talking about his experience with Germany. And with his age, he had been around when the war happened, and he was in the war as a soldier. He was in Germany after the Second World War, where everything was destroyed. But of course, he also was in England, in London, where many, many buildings were destroyed, where many people died in the world. And it was interesting as an 18-year-old to suddenly be confronted with the history of my country, even though I was born in 1968, over 20 years after the war had finished. So that was an interesting, very personal experience with being, I don't want to say being held responsible for the country, the actions, the past actions of my country. But it was yeah, I suppose it was part of that. In Potsdam, in Berlin, I said Berlin because that's why it's the German pronunciation. There are something like I think they're stumbling stones. I think that's the official word for it. In German, it's called Stolpersteine. And these are, I think, brass little stones. And often there are cobbled pavements, and they are outside of houses. And they bear the names of people who used to live in these houses, of Jewish people. And it gives the date of their lives, and all of them lost their lives in the 1940s in concentration camps. And there are thousands and thousands of those. So there are constant reminders of the recent German history. Of course, in schools, there is, that's one of the main topics in history lessons, but also in ethics lessons, also in German literature, because so much literature is about that time. So basically, for 10, 14 years of our lives as young Germans, we are growing up with the memory or with the instilled memory, being reminded of what Germany did, Nazi Germany did. And this, of course, is instilling something like a collective guilt. And one could argue very rightly so. And when I say Nazi Germany, of course, I wasn't born there, but it wasn't, and I say that very clearly, not Nazis and Germans. One can hold certainly the vast majority of people who lived in Germany, of Germans who lived in Germany at the time, to a certain degree responsible, because they did not stand up. They did not always completely participate, but one could absolutely argue that they conspired, and they made it possible with giving in with their passivity. So yes, there is something like a collective guilt that Germans are a particular example for. But often when we look at what our families may have done, what our countries may have done a few decades, a few hundred years ago, then there is something that we feel, wow, this is somehow what I'm connected with, because this is my country in this lifetime. In America, of course, it's so interesting. I have got very, very many Black friends in America, and many of them can remember times when they didn't have the rights of white people. Many can go back just a few generations back, and they know that their families were enslaved, or at least to a certain degree living in conditions that were very, very close to slavery and obviously repression. So there's collective guilt on one side, and there is collective repression, collective victimhood on the other side. And to a certain degree, many of us have both. So yes, this is how history holds us captive. And I think it's incredibly important to realize that the memory is vital. Without the memory, without the stories, without the realization, without a certain degree of connection to that, we will probably not step up and change things. But the question is, does history really inspire us to change things? And I think that's a very, very interesting question. And the question is whether it does it enough. One could argue that going back further, hundreds of years, sometimes millennia, we can see cycles and we can see patterns. So history is repeating itself. We constantly seem to have a side of people in power suppressing other people and to a certain degree enslaving other people, and on the other side, people who are victims, who are people repressed. And that's going on again and again and again. Does it really have to be like this? I find sometimes the topic of history really quite depressing, and I wonder, so what can we do about this? And I think there's one thing we can really do. We can say, I'm making history myself. I am creating history that I want to see. I am changing the course of history. And I do actually feel that with our collective memory, with social media, with all the knowledge we have access to about how the world, well, I don't want to say it got on this trajectory of getting worse and worse. It's just repeating all the difficulties. So how we can step out of that becomes, I feel, much clearer when we look back at why history developed the way it did, why nations and ethnic groups and so developed, all out of fear. Why do we build an army? Because we want to defend ourselves. Why do we build a fence? Because we feel then more secure. Why do we not look up when we see somebody passing us? Because we don't want to be challenged by them. We don't want to look into their eyes. We are even afraid sometimes of saying something. We rather look down. So it's all based on fear. History is all based on fear. So what about creating a history of love? And I now want to take that a little bit more personal. And I would like to just ask you to do a little exercise and just let Reiki inspire you. So let's just bring the hands together for a moment and just close your eyes and connect to Reiki. And just ask Reiki, how has history shaped me? And how can I turn that into something positive? And then move up to your third eye and just see what comes into your mind. And then bring your hands down again and come back into the here and now. What was interesting is I got some ideas myself, but I got one that was not just meant personally, but that was more meant as a general statement. And that was, we don't really learn from history because we are looking at the kings, at the heroes, at the people who had power, and we want to also have that. We still haven't stepped out and realized, well, it's those few rather than having everybody sharing. So often we want whatever it is. It may be winning the lottery. It may be winning America's Got Talent. It may be making it in politics or making it in our business endeavors, but becoming part of the elite, of the few that we often almost see as the chosen view, rather than realizing this is where history went wrong. Or this is why history repeated itself, because we always wanted to belong to those who were better off, rather than really fighting for everybody should be better off. And there is enough. Again, there is the fear. So I thought it was interesting. And what is so fascinating, this is something I've actually not rehearsed or even thought about preparing. And my guide said when I started the show, they said, you are prepared enough, so just keep going. And I think this is really quite fascinating. So let's just get inspired by Reiki, what a world could look like when history does not repeat itself. So let's just ask another question. Just reconnect to Reiki and then ask the question, what could a change in history, a world that is not bound by the cycles of history that we have repeated again and again. What could a world look like when we create a different kind of history? And then just move up to your third eye and just see what comes into your mind and stay there for a moment and just really follow these ideas. Just visualize it, imagine it. Let Reiki give you some images, words, and ideas. And then ask one further question. What can I do to make this happen and to create a better world? And then just take a moment to bring your hands back and thank Reiki for the inspiration. And let's now just place our hands on our hearts for a moment to let this sink in, to give us the momentum, to give us the energy to bring in this change. And once more, take a moment to thank Reiki and come back into the here and now. What I thought was interesting when I started thinking about the topic for tonight, I thought about Reiki history and how important that was for me. When I started with Reiki, I wanted to get it right. I wanted to understand where Reiki was coming from. And so much I learned about Hawaii Takata, this lady from Hawaii, American citizen born to Japanese parents who learned Reiki in the 1930s in Tokyo and then started bringing it, teaching it in Hawaii and then in mainland USA and Canada, and really was almost single-handedly responsible of bringing Reiki into the world as we understand Reiki today. There is quite a lot of information about her teacher, Chujiro Hayashi, who in the 1930s had a Reiki clinic in Tokyo. But then so much about the actual founder of the system of Reiki, Mikao Sui, was shrouded in history for a long time. In the, I think, late 1990s, it became known to more people that there is a memorial stone in the grounds of the Saihoji Temple in Tokyo, and that there was a lot of historical information on Mikao Sui. So suddenly he was verifiable, and we know a little bit more about him. And I was fascinated, and I traveled to Japan twice, and I wanted to understand more and more. Today, very little of that matters to me. All that matters is Reiki, the healing hands. And once we connect to Reiki, once we feel the energy in our hands, we have a direct connection. And the connection is not connected to history. It is completely in the present moment. And this is so fascinating. We can, if we want, step out of history and we can become in an instant completely present. We can feel our connection to eternity. So let's just do that for a moment. Let's just bring the hands together, reconnect to Reiki, and just feel the connection and just be completely in this connection, completely present, completely in the here and now, and connected to eternity. And then just come back into the here and now that again is connected to history. For me, one approach to history, of course, is one that personally is very, very important for me. The one thing I learned in addition to Reiki was past life regression. And for me, it's very connected with Reiki, the idea that we are eternal beings. We are souls in a body. We incarnate in different genders, in different countries, in different ethnic groups, into different religions. So all of these things are connected with history. They come and go. They're connected with our experience here. But it shows that we can change history because we change every single time we reincarnate. And then we so extremely identify with the culture we are born into, or we so extremely try to get out of that culture and break with that culture, rather than thinking, okay, that is my experience now. And take a deep breath and feel that there is more to us and that we are eternal beings and that history is nothing but an experience and that we can create our own experiences and collectively create new history. But of course, for that, we need help. And so as in every YouTube show, I would like to invite everybody who's present now and who is going to watch a replay and join at a later stage to connect to Reiki and to connect with everybody and to share Reiki. To do one big, amazing virtual Reiki share that is actually not virtual, that is energetic and therefore not bound by the idea of doing things online. We can just feel the energy. So when you're ready, just bring your hands together and connect to Reiki once more. If you've learned Reiki 2, then just draw the connection or distance symbol, whatever name you give it, to connect really deeply with everybody on this Reiki share. And then just connect with everybody. Just open your hands and feel that the energy that you are connected to, that Reiki is flowing through you and flowing to everybody who is joining in this Reiki share. And really tune into the connection. Just take a moment to feel the connection with everybody that Reiki helps us to experience. And then just take a moment to bring your hands back together, thank Reiki, and again, come back into the here and now. Thank you so much for joining. This was really very deep. It was very deep for me. And I mention that quite often, I know, but every time I share an exercise or I facilitate an exercise, I'm doing it myself. And I'm getting so much out of that. I'm getting so many answers. It's just fascinating. And it's clearer and clearer to me. History is not set in stone. We make history. And we can change history, and we can step into our power. And this is what Reiki is all about, giving that our power back, realizing there is more to us than just the physical limitations. We have the connection to something higher, and we can create a better world and a better life. And I'm so excited that we are working on this together and that we are having these regular connections. And I'm so looking forward to seeing you again next week for the YouTube show again at the same time. I will by then be back in London and the flights should all work out so that I'll make it on time. And then I will see you there. And until then, just have a wonderful rest of the week. And well, if you have any comments, if you have any questions, also if you have any ideas about a topic that you would like us to reflect on and to do maybe a whole show about, then please make sure to send me an email, Torsten at thereikirevolution.com. And well, have a wonderful rest of the day.